Ikoria Bond.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased to rise on behalf of New Zealand First and speak to the third reading of the Health Protection Amendment Bill. This bill seeks to amend the Health Act 1956 around infectious diseases, and it will repeal the Tuberculosis Act 1948. New Zealand First supports these provisions of the bill. However, the provisions to continue to support artificial UV tanning services is where New Zealand First must draw the line. Mr Speaker, there is nothing more important than the protection of New Zealanders' health, and there are provisions within this bill that aim to do just that. I have been rather fortunate to sit on the House Select Committee on a few occasions, and I can tell you, Mr Speaker, firsthand of the hard-working individuals who comprise of the Select Committee. As my colleague Barbara Stewart has said and pointed out, it is a brilliant committee and works hard to improve the health of all New Zealanders, working constructively towards meeting those needs. We know that the bill has three main aims pertaining to infectious diseases. Firstly, to increase the number of diseases that are notifiable, which will result in improved monitoring, incremental options to manage individuals with certain infectious diseases who are at risk of infecting others, and improved contact tracing to inform and provide treatment, if necessary, to those who have or may have been exposed to an infectious disease. New Zealand First supports these aims of this bill. We are pleased that the sexually transmitted infections are being treated more seriously. The infection chlamydia has been added to the list of notifiable diseases, which we view as essential, given it is the most common sexually transmitted disease in New Zealand. Often there are no symptoms or signs of chlamydia, so it is important that sexual partners are contacted so they can receive treatment in a timely manner. We know that if chlamydia is left untreated, it can cause permanent damage, including infertility. New Zealand First supports the Ministry of Health in their continuing effort to improve the communication of these risks to young people and the importance of seeking treatment. We remain of the opinion that provisions within this bill must be proportionate to the level of the risk to the general public. That said, Mr Speaker, the provisions pertaining to artificial services are disappointing. The lack of a total ban falls short of what is actually required. New Zealand First knows this government are gutless and are running scared at the thought of outright banning artificial UV tanning services. Minister Coleman himself knows that fewer New Zealanders are using sunbeds. It is not just the opposition parties on this side of the House that can see the logic in outright banning UV tanning services. The submitters told us to ban it. The Cancer Society told us to ban it. The New Zealand Medical Council told us to ban it. The World Health Organization advised us to ban it. But this national-led government sitting up there in their ivory tower do not see the real devastating effects of sunbed use. And they have taken a soft approach and decided to age restrict UV tanning services. That is gutless. That's absolutely gutless. New Zealand First would like to point out to this national-led government that skin cancer, melanoma, it does not discriminate against age. Unfortunately, we saw this firsthand with the sad passing of Holly Devine at just 26 years of age on Friday the 17th of June. A life ended far too early by melanoma. This is just not an age-related cancer, so it makes no sense that a ban on sunbeds would only apply to those persons under the age of 18. We believe that banning commercial sunbeds would have been a very positive and proactive step to protect the future health of New Zealanders. We know that we have the highest rate of melanoma in the world, along with Australia, yet the government does not seem to regard this as a big enough health issue to implement a ban on a device which is known to cause skin cancer. Overwhelming evidence provided by the World Health Organization shows that UV tanning devices are carcinogenic. Should have been enough to lead this government to outright ban sunbeds completely. The Ministry of Health tells us that from 2009 to 2013, there were 1,477 new causes of melanoma in those aged under 44 years old. Mr Speaker, in plain language, New Zealand has the highest rate of invasive melanoma in the world. and the highest death rate, as my colleague Barbara Stewart said. Let's remember that before the age of 35, the risk of developing melanoma shoots up by 75%. An estimate of the number of skin cancers treated every year in New Zealand is a staggering 67,000. This is not an insignificant number and should tell us we must do more. The Cancer Society estimates skin cancer to cost over $123 million each year to the health system and also loss of productivity. Not only to mention there is a human cost, there are high financial costs as well. Why won't the government get some guts and show some leadership and ban UV tanning beds here in New Zealand? Without the ban of some beds, voluntary regulations will remain. We've heard from other speakers on this bill about how they don't believe that this will actually be enforceable. We know that many operators and salons and nail studios are not actually complying with this voluntary regulation. I have seen the evidence of this myself, Mr. Speaker, in hair and beauty salons and nail clinics. The requirements are to wear protective goggles, give a thorough skin analysis and consultation per tanner. And Mr. Speaker, I want to just briefly talk about that. Salons that have sunbeds within them or sunbed-only tanning salons, they simply download whatever they choose off the internet to be deemed sufficient to ask 3 questions, 4 questions that are absolutely irrelevant to give a precise consultation to suntanners to ensure that, one, their skin is of sufficient requirement to actually tan on the beds in the first place. In all the years that I've been in the industry, we have never had any such tough monitoring at all under a voluntary regulation, and I'm aware that still occurs today. At the very least, we should ensure that minimum standards are upheld and are mandatory. Not only that, but there simply is not enough feet on the ground in the terms of people power, Mr. Speaker, to check this within these businesses around New Zealand. I'm aware that in Auckland they have very limited resources in the council to send out health inspectors into hair salons and beauty industry sector, and in fact some of them are lucky if they get visited once a year. So how on earth is this going to be policed? The government is adamant that extra compliance measures for sunbed operators will put people off having them in their businesses. Well, I absolutely agree with that, because what's going to happen, Mr. Speaker, is they'll pull those beds outside of their businesses and they will take them home and offer services to clients there. This will force some bed tanning industry to be underground at home and so that they can't be monitored. As I stand here, I know that there are more than 10 people right now having those services within homes. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, this government is out of touch. New Zealand First asked about what about the lives that are lost and the effects of families from skin cancer and melanoma death. We believe that the government has missed an opportunity to do something positive for the future health of this country. The government seems determined to go against the consensus and indeed common sense. New Zealand First supports Part 1 of this bill, but we have drawn the line in the sand and will not tolerate the soft measures taken by this government in Part 2 of this bill. It is really important that New Zealanders know that New Zealand First will stick to our guns when bills such as this one in its entirety are not fit for the purpose and make no sense at all. Mr. Speaker, for this reason, New Zealand First will abstain from voting on this bill.
I call Barbara Kuraga.